Season 2 of Succession kicks off 2 days after Season 1 ended. Kendall has decided to go to a rehab facility in Iceland, but he ends up getting called away because his dad wants him to go on TV and make a statement on why he decided to go back to his dad's side, why he backed out of the deal, hoping that it would boost their stock price and make it a little more difficult for Sandy and Stewie to end up buying the company. And Kendall's willing to do it. He feels like he doesn't have a choice, but he's also very awkward and flustered, and everyone's kind of noticing it, and the publicist even wants to pull the interview, but he reassures her, I can do it. And he kills the interview. He handles himself great and explains the company line that they gave him, which was, I saw their plan and my dad's plan was better. They then ask him, well, what would happen tomorrow if your dad got hit by a bus? And he says, well, then New York City would be down one bus because they certainly wouldn't be down one CEO. And everyone in the family is watching this from their different parts of the world, including Logan, who is watching it with his board of trustees, if you will, and he shuts the TV off and says, that's the first good things my son's ever done. Kendall then flies back to New York and sheepishly walks back into the Waystar Royco headquarters. And he walks into a meeting with Logan and his advisors, and he finds out that his little speech on TV didn't quite work. The stock's going up marginally, but not much. Logan then kicks all the advisors out because he wants to know how exactly Sandy got to his son. And more importantly, what exactly Sandy knows about him. And Kendall spilled a lot of beans. He tells Logan that while Stewie thinks he'll come to the table and negotiate, Sandy feels like he's coming for a fight. But Sandy thinks he can win because Kendall gave him all this information that leads to the conclusion Logan Roy is simply an unstable CEO. And Stewie and Sandy are currently trying to get Waystar Royco shareholders to sell them their shares so that they can do this takeover. So Logan instructs Kendall to grab a piece of paper and call the 10 biggest shareholders and try to keep them from selling. And all the while, Kendall just looks like a dog with his tail between his legs. As he's walking out, Carolina hands him the piece of paper with all the names on it, and he explains to her how while he's trying to get better, and he is getting better, he still needs drugs. So that night, Greg ends up bringing him coke, but it's not from his normal dealer, and Greg had to go to some dude in the park. And Kendall describes it as the worst coke he's ever done. And while Kendall was banging lines, Logan is meeting with his financial advisor, Jamie Laird, and he's trying to get Jamie to give him advice on what he should do, sell or fight. And after pulling his punches, Jamie gets the okay to tell it like it is, that he really should sell because it's a good deal. Because this could be a vicious fight that extends for years, and maybe you win, but you're going to exhaust all your assets to do so. And they feel like there's blood in the water because your stock price is going down and tech is breathing down your neck. And there might be 1, 2, tops, legacy media operations that survive this. And yes, Sandy's offer is inflated by ego and spite. But if you don't sell to him, are things really going to be different in 4 to 5 years? Culturally, structurally, financially, you're in a toilet. And in 5 years, you're just going to be in a bigger toilet. But I understand you don't want to sell to this guy because he's your rival, but the wise thing to do is to sell. And you always do the wise thing. So Logan texts all of his kids and informs them that he is planning on selling. And they all get it at different times. Shiv and Tom are currently on their honeymoon, but they end up cutting it short to go back. Roman gets it while he's addressing the satellite explosion. And who knows where Connor gets it, but they're all going to have a family meeting at their summer White House. And none of the kids really know if this is for real. So when Shiv and Roman get there, they go off on a walk to figure this whole thing out. And Shiv makes mention that this is really good for Roman because Kendall can't be CEO. He just tried to stab Dad in the back a couple days ago. And I'm with Gil, so this is great for you. And Connor's Connor. It's a cool moment. Good luck. But Roman just thinks she's just trying to get into his head. When Kendall arrives, he wants to talk to Logan about if this thing is real or not, but Logan shoos him off saying, I'll talk to the whole family. Kendall then goes and talks to the family investigator who gives him an update on the crash. And he lets him know that when they left the scene, it just looked like there was only one person, not two. And they're expecting the coroner results to come back soon, which is going to lead to it was an accidental death. And when that happens, he should be in the clear. And it's a big relief in one way, but he's still acting extremely skittish. He then walks out of the house and he runs into Roman and Shiv walking back. And they, just like everybody else, wants to know what the hell happened. But he's still sticking with this story of I saw their plan and Dad's plan was better. And neither of them believe that. They start throwing insults at him to try to provoke him, but he doesn't take the bait. And the more and more they egg him on to get the real story of why he backed out of the deal, the more frustrated they get because he doesn't tell them. Now that night they were planning on having this extravagant dinner, but there is this stench in the house. And when it's finally located, Logan goes nuts because stuck in the chimney was a bag full of dead raccoons that have been rotting. And Logan orders all the food to be thrown away because they've been sitting in the stench and says, we're just going to eat pizza. But he demands to talk to the contractor who built the house. So that night, he addresses the whole family and asks them, do we really want to fight? I'm bound to go to the board with this offer that I've been given, but if we fight, I have to name a successor. So what does everybody think? And everybody's there, including everybody's significant other, but they're all hesitant to give their real opinion. And when it comes time for Roman to give his opinion, he says, I don't feel comfortable giving it in front of everybody if I might be running things. So Logan goes into his office and calls them in one by one. And the first person he calls in is Roman. And Roman's advice is to keep news for the political power and the market manipulation, and all the rest of the assets kind of play the markets with. And as far as Sandy and Stewie, you call in every favor you have to get them out of there. We're talking hookers, politicians, you name it, get them to back off. And as Roman is making his pitch to his dad, Shiv is talking to Tom, and she feels like this is nothing more than a test. The family's version of King Solomon and the baby. So when Shiv gets in there, she lets her dad know that selling would be great for her career because there would be no more blowback. But if he wants to stay and fight, she does have some thoughts. The first is cut bait with all of these things that aren't making you money. You don't need them. Expand parks, expand cruises, and lose news. Print, TV, lose it, it's bad news. And just expand for the future. Logan asks her if she would take over, but she doesn't actually believe it's a real offer. And he says, well, if we sit here and fight, I have to name Kendall. And Shiv gets really pissed off because she feels like her dad and Kendall have made a back alley deal, and that's why Kendall is back. That Kendall was coming in to stop the deal from happening, and then he would be named the CEO, even though no such deal exists. She goes as far as to say that if Kendall takes over, she will sell her shares. But her dad simply tells her there is no deal and formally offers her the future position of CEO. She still doesn't buy it, though. She asks if selling is even real. And he says, yeah, it is, if you don't commit to it. And it takes even further proof for her to finally realize, hey, maybe this offer is legit. And she says, if this is real, yes, of course I would want to do it. But for now, we're going to have to keep it between us. And Logan says, yeah, of course, we'll get you up to speed, we'll fast track you, and then we'll name you CEO. And they both seem really excited about this future. Now, if you're wondering where Connor is in this whole situation, there's a reason why he didn't offer it to Connor. Because the big conversation while Shiv is in the meeting with her dad is that Connor is planning to buy Napoleon's dick. So there you go, case in point. So when Shiv comes out, she breaks up that Napoleon penis conversation, and she lets Tom know that he'll be named chair of Global Broadcast News, but she never once mentions that she's going to be the future CEO. Logan then, after meeting with his kids, speaks to the contractor and reams him out, because the contractor wanted to charge him $300,000, and they came to an agreement on $200,000. And Logan is convinced that the contractor's the one who put the bag full of dead raccoons in the chimney, even though the contractor is claiming ignorance. So Logan says, fine, I'm going to pay you $100,000, and if you don't like it, sue me, and let's see who wins. Even though it's really a $300,000 job. And that right there is the power of Logan Roy. He then goes upstairs to address his entire family on what he's decided to do, and he has decided to fight. And in the meantime, Kendall and Roman will act as co-COOs. And Roman is beside himself trying to figure out how Kendall, who 3 days ago was about to stab their dad in the back, just got a promotion, but that's the way that Logan wants it. Then the conversation of the successor pops up, and he says, well, that could be anybody. I mean, we can just throw a name out there. Hell, it can be Jerry for all we care. Yeah, Jerry, okay, it's you. Even though Jerry has no shot of actually taking the company over, and she knows that. So after he's done addressing the whole family, both Logan and Kendall head to New York City to meet up with Stewie and Sandy. But right before they enter the restaurant, Logan tells Kendall, tell him I'm on an important call. I'm not going in there. And Stewie knows that that's just a power play bullshit move. But Stewie really wants to know what the hell happened to the deal. How did Logan get him back? And he once again says the same thing he said on television. I saw your deal and my dad's was better. And just like the rest of them, nobody believes him. He then goes to meet with Sandy where he gets a phone call from his dad telling him he's not showing up even though he's in the car outside. And then Kendall asks on the behest of his father if they can do like an asset swap where both parties end up coming out happy, but they're not interested in that. They want the whole company. And that's when Kendall says, okay, well then I was instructed to tell you. Obviously our public line will be that we're considering that offer, but he's never going to go to the board and suggest selling. And it doesn't matter what you offer. You're going to bleed cash, he's going to bleed cash. It'll never end. And maybe you kill him. But if you don't, he's going to aim to kill you. He will go bankrupt and he will go to prison before he ever lets you own his company. And he will kill you when it comes to the business. And if that doesn't work, he will send people to kill your dogs, to have sex with your women, and it'll never be over. And Sandy kind of nods and says, okay, let's go with that route. In episode 2, the family is at one of their amusement parks for one of Kendall's kids' birthday parties, but Kendall, Roman, and Shiv are called away to be with their dad. Because Stewie has gone on national television and is ripping apart Waystar Royco, laying out the plan that he has to take over and painting the picture of a guy in Logan Roy who is simply unfit to run a company. And it's right from the playbook that Kendall gave them. So they're now in a proxy fight, and they're not quite sure what to do. And Jerry gives the suggestion that don't put out an announcement quite yet because it's going to make you guys look desperate and reactive. But Shiv says, no, that's ridiculous. We're not going to sit here and let him take all our investors away. Put out an announcement. And Logan agrees with her. Logan's also worried about Volter. He's worried they got swindled on that deal. The company's been losing money, and Kendall reassures him that they vetted that deal and that it's a good, sound business strategy, but Logan wants it fixed ASAP. And Logan has told both Kendall and Roman to head to Volter and find out what's the problem. So that's what they do. They both head to Volter and they meet with Lawrence, and Roman's relationship with Lawrence is a lot better than Kendall's relationship with Lawrence. The first thing Lawrence asks, though, is who's in charge? Who am I really speaking to? And Kendall explains how they're co-COO, so they both share equal responsibility. The next question Lawrence has is, all right, who's worried about us? And while Kendall says, well, it's me and Roman says, let's just cut the shit. It's our dad. He's worried that he got screwed on this deal, and he wants us to come just figure out what's going on and what's wrong. And don't take it personal, because dad thinks everybody screwed him. But Lawrence reassures him that their numbers were solid when they were bought, and their numbers are still solid. But they're still going to have to do a deep dive of the company. So they're given separate offices, and while Kendall is just drowning in paperwork, intentionally, mind you, by Lawrence, Roman is sitting in the other office with his thumb up his ass, not knowing what to do. And Roman isn't aware this is a bad look, so he calls up Jerry to try to get her over there to help him out. But Jerry is dealing with the Proxy war and can't. So with no help from Jerry and the fact that he's on his own with no ideas, Roman decides to take a couple staffers out. Now that same day, Tom has started his new gig at ATN, and ATN is really nothing more than Fox News with a different name. And he's brought Greg along, but Greg doesn't want to work at ATN. It was the one place under the Waystar Royco umbrella that he didn't want to work at because of his morality. But Tom says, Greg, you don't have any morality. Shut up. Take the job. Tom then meets with Sid Peach, who really runs things at ATN, and the conversation starts off good about how it's better to move forward with their relationship so they can get a lot accomplished. They both address the staff about Tom's arrival, but when they get into a meeting privately, that's where things start to go south. Tom starts off kind of chiding their news values, which she takes offense to, but he says, well, it's amazing. You're really nothing more than Logan Roy's puppet. Whatever he thinks, you magically think. But she thinks that they're a different voice for people who are sick of cappuccino drinking douchebags like himself. But he brings a different angle to this because their demographic is 60 plus, geriatrics. And he thinks he can change that look. She tells him, every 4 years Logan sends one of you guys my way and nothing really changes. And he says, oh, okay, well, were any of those guys his son-in-law? I'm here to trim the flab, but she runs a pretty tight ship and she says good luck. And when he gets out of this contentious meeting, he meets up with Greg and says, you try to find the fat from the basement, I'll try to find it from the penthouse, and then we're going to trim it all. Now, Tom's wife Shiv has had a day. She heads to an event for Gil where she's approached by Nate about their affair. Nate's worried that word will get back to his wife because he hasn't told her yet, and Tom is well aware of what happened and doesn't really care. And that's pretty much Shiv's standpoint. She doesn't really care if Nate's wife knows or not. It's not really her problem. But she does get good news at this event because Gil's numbers are so good that he needs to start planning for 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and he's asked Siobhan to be his chief of staff. But this would obviously get in the way of her taking over Waystar, so she heads that night to go meet with Logan, and the first thing Logan tells her is, I need 3 women for the board. The more diverse, the better, and she'll get him those names the next day. But the real reason she's shown up is because she wants to hear her dad's plan on integrating her to the leadership role. And his plan is a 3-year plan, which is way longer than she was expecting. He explains that you're a woman with no experience, and she says, oh, okay, so because I'm a woman, it's a negative. He says, of course it's a negative. Let's be real here. All right, well, if you don't like that, what works for you then? And she knows she needs time because she hasn't told Tom, and she certainly hasn't told Gil, and she reassures him that she does want the job. It's just simply about the process, and that doesn't include a 3-year gap. Unfortunately, he doesn't really have time to think about switching up the plan because he has to get into it with this proxy battle with Stewie and Sandy. And the next day, he meets with Kendall, Jerry, and Roman about the Volter problem because he needs to get this thing settled before their investor meetings. And Kendall explains that through his findings, it is quite a shit show, but it can be a profitable shit show. It just needs to be cleaned up with the right management. They need some accounting, they need some analytics, they really just need adults in the room. They also need a substantial investment, but Kendall reminds his dad that to make money, you need to spend money. Roman, on the other hand, does not see it like that. He thinks that they should gut the whole thing and cut bait. He really just completely shits all over Kendall's idea. He goes on to explain how he took a couple staffers out drinking and got from them that they're planning on unionizing, and that's definitely not a good thing. So, with the fact it's losing money, with the fact that they're trying to unionize, and with the fact that it doesn't fit our values, just close the damn thing. And yeah, this will be a bitter pill to swallow, especially in a proxy fight. Roman thinks it makes him look ruthless, while Kendall thinks it makes him look weak. And after hearing both sides, Logan sides with Roman. Gut the thing. And he tasks Kendall with doing so, bringing Roman along to help out with this proxy fight. Now, that night, the entire family, other than Logan, heads to Connor's new place in New York City because he's having a housewarming party. And at this housewarming party, you find out he's still planning on running for president, which is laughable because it's Connor. Now, Tom runs into Greg at this housewarming party, and Greg reports back about where they could trim some fat. And the big area is the fact that they're still doing everything analog, where they could just switch to digital and it could save them a bunch of money. The only thing Tom really cares about, though, is how many people he can fire, and it's 30 to 50, which gets him really excited. Meanwhile, Shiv and Roman are just watching Kendall pace outside, and they're discussing what happened that day with Logan siding with Roman in the Battle of Walter. And Shiv asks him, is that even a good idea to close Walter? But Roman says it's a great idea because it's Kendall's baby. It makes him look like an idiot. Even though in reality, Roman is second guessing whether he made the right move, suggesting to gut Walter. Shiv then goes to talk to Kendall about the move because she doesn't think it's a good move to gut Walter. And she's very surprised when Kendall doesn't put up a fight for it, basically taking the approach that if it's what dad wants, that's the right move. And she can't figure out how Kendall is 1 minute idolizing their dad, but the next minute he's trying to stab him in the back. When Shiv and Tom get home from the party, Shiv decides this is the best time to tell Tom about the offer to be CEO. And Tom's a little bit upset because the plan originally between the two was for Tom to take over as CEO. And she's telling him how she doesn't even think it's a real offer, but that is still the plan for Tom to take over. But she's reassuring him that it's nothing more than a modification of that plan. Now, Kendall is obviously supposed to gut Walter, and the next day he goes to talk to Lawrence about it. But instead of telling him that he's going to gut the company, he tells him that he actually is planning on saving the company. All he needs from Lawrence is full transparency on the issue. No more bullshit books. He needs to see the actual crux of the issue. He also would like to address the staff about not unionizing, and that's going to be difficult because the entire staff hates him. But it's going to be necessary if they want to save Walter. So he addresses them and tells them that he really does believe they are the future of Waystar Royco. But he also believes it's a mistake to unionize. And he tells them how he thinks he can get them a pay bump, better benefits. Just please, put the union stuff on ice. And Roman has learned about Kendall's plan to save Walter, and that night at a dinner party that he hosts between him, Tabitha, Tom, and Shiv, he tells Shiv, what should I do in this situation? I mean, should I let him just do this thing? Or do I basically rat him out, thus really killing Kendall forever? And her advice is to let him do what he's going to do, because if it really is a bad idea, it's going to blow up in his face eventually. So Roman stays quiet, and it's a good thing, because the next day, Kendall heads into Walter's headquarters and fires everybody. At first, the staff thinks it's a joke because a day earlier he's telling them how they're the future of the company, but he's not joking. No, he needs them gone now. He's moved the profitable portion of the company up to the 7th floor, and even managed to take some of their bright ideas before he fired them. In a truly savage move. Lawrence runs in wondering what the hell happened, and Kendall apologizes for the whole cloak and dagger approach and explains how he just needed more time to figure out where they were profitable. And he also needed more time to keep the union off their back. And as for why he did it, it's pretty simple. It's because Logan told him to. And Lawrence can't get over the fact that this guy just gutted a company all because Daddy told him to. Kendall then heads over to Logan's office to tell him about Walter being gutted, but they're interjected when Shiv calls Logan on his cell phone, letting him know that she's quit Gil. After a very heated argument between the two that started innocently enough after Shiv joked about giving Gil hand sanitizer after he shook somebody's hand, she ended up quitting / getting fired. Either way, she's out on Gil and she's full in on taking over Waystar Royco. And Logan's very happy to hear this. As soon as he gets off the phone, though, Roman shows up, seeing that his dad is having a meeting with Kendall and wants to know what the hell's going on. Logan tells him that Kendall will now be working in his office because he needs him for the Proxy battle and to basically piss off. And after Roman leaves, very confused, Logan tells Kendall, you did good. Have a seat, get comfortable. And it's as if the prodigal son has returned. In episode 3, Logan announces to his advisors that he's planning on buying this media conglomerate called PGN. Jerry lets him know it might not be the best idea in their current situation to be acquiring an asset with Sandy and Stewie breathing down their neck, but Logan doesn't care. He then goes around the room, and it's obvious that a lot of people are hesitant to say that they like the idea, and they simply just lie to Logan's face. But Logan's line of thinking is if we buy PGN, we're simply too big for Stewie and Sandy to get. It's still a very risky acquisition, and he goes around the room and once again has everybody agree that they think that he should go after it. But once he leaves, that's when people start voicing their hesitation. Nobody's quite sure why they're buying it, and the whole reason they're buying it is because it's been Logan Roy's white whale. They wrote a couple of bad stories about him, their news isn't very kind to him. It's simply nothing more than vengeance. And Carl, the CFO, just can't understand why they're buying a $20 billion asset out of spiteful vengeance. And Kendall speaks up and says, no, you're right to voice this concern. I mean, the debt from this acquisition could end up being too tough to manage, and it death spirals. And we all end up going down with the ship. And that's when Roman starts believing that maybe Kendall doesn't love this as much as he was telling their dad. But either way, Kendall gives the order to get it done for Logan. Logan then meets with Roman, Kendall, and Jamie Laird and explains that acquiring PGN is a takeover defense. He asks Jamie what's next, and Jamie says, well, the tough part's going to be contacting the family. We need a safe set of hands. And they did like one guy in your inner circle, but you fired him. It was Frank. And Logan still thinks that Frank is a backstabber, but now he needs Frank. So he tells Kendall, invite him to the retreat in Hungary that he's having for all of his upper management folks. He once again reiterates that there can be no leaks. But he gets interrupted by Carolina, who shows him a video that Connor is planning on putting out on Instagram that's going to announce his presidency, but also says how he plans on paying no taxes whatsoever, and begs the police and the federal government to, quote, come and get me. And when Roman gets home, Tabitha is actually watching that video, laughing about it because it just looks so stupid. He wouldn't survive 1 second in jail. Roman then asks, hey, you still have that friend Naomi Pierce, right? And she is the Pierce P in PGN. He explains to Tabitha how their dad is trying to buy PGN, and Roman wants to use Tabitha as an in with the family to possibly broker a deal. And this would really work for him because it would be like the death nail for Kendall. Now, everybody's planning on taking that trip to Hungary, but two people that will be noticeably absent from that trip are Connor and Shiv. And when Tom gets home and starts to pack for it, Shiv has just gotten off the phone with her dad, and she has to now go over to Connor's house and try to talk some sense into him by not releasing the video. And she wants to talk about the Pierce deal with Tom, but she's not even supposed to know that. She found out via Jerry. And she's trying to get all the details from Tom, who was in the meeting, and Tom thinks it could be a great idea, but Shiv thinks it's terrible. Explaining that the blowback alone would be awful. I mean, could you imagine the Logan Roy owning all of the news? Where would she actually get her news? Jerry thinks Logan has gone mad, and Shiv agrees with her. She further explains that we're talking about a $20 billion acquisition that either breaks the company or takes 20 years to integrate. And she's saying all of this because she wants Tom to talk to their dad on this retreat. Try to talk him out of buying Pierce. But Tom doesn't want to do that. He feels like she's using him as a puppet. But Tom packs his bags and heads off to Hungary with all the rest of the upper management, including Greg, by the way, who spent the morning talking to the woman who's going to write a biography about Logan Roy. And he was just meeting with her to vet her, but he ended up saying something. He thought it was off the record. She thought it was on it. Now he's panicking. And he ended the meeting right there. And on the plane ride over to Hungary, Carolina has some bad news about the biography. Somebody has talked. And Logan is pissed off because he told Carolina and Jerry to stop it. But Jerry says, I can't exactly stop the publication of a book. It's good to come out. And Logan says, well, anybody who speaks to her is dead to me. Logan then orders a guy named Sam to just scan emails, scan phone records, and find out who the inside mole is that was talking to this biographer. And when Greg finds out about Sam, he now has the fear of God in him. But everybody arrives in Hungary, including Frank, and Frank is very suspicious, but Logan acts like he didn't just fire him a few months ago. He gives him a watch as a gift because he needs Frank. Now, while everybody's getting settled in Turkey, Shiv heads over to Connor's house to try to talk some sense into him. And she arrives there to find that he's hired some pretty heavy hitters for his political campaign. And Shiv's trying to call in a favor to him to try to get him to not release his video because it's a bad look for him and it's a really bad look for the family. And he decides to make Shiv a counter proposal, offering her a job on his campaign. But she has no interest in that whatsoever and tries to get the topic back on the video, telling him that that video is batshit insane. He agrees to think about it, and with Connor contemplating, Shiv and Willow decide to head off to a bar because Willow is meeting with a bunch of her actors for her Broadway play. And Shiv figures that if she can't get through to Connor, maybe she can get through to Willow that this isn't a good idea to release this video. Willow tells her that they both support each other's dreams. Hers is Broadway, his is the White House. But Shiv says that the guys that he hired will suck $10 million out of him before he even notices. And her Broadway play is not going to cost $10 million. And like Connor, she says, I'll think about it. And right after she says that, one of the actors in the play walks by, and Shiv starts eye-fucking the shit out of him. But as she's doing so, she's texting Tom trying to get an update on if he's talked to her dad or not. But he hasn't, because they're not hunting yet, and it's still a really touchy subject for him. But Logan isn't even on Tom's mind right now, because Tom is busy finding out from Greg that Greg was possibly the one who talked to the journalist. Greg thinks Tom and him are close and that they've been through a lot so he can keep a secret. And Tom tells Greg, dude, you got to put this in the vault. I mean, I'll keep your secret, but Logan will literally kill you. And the whole reason why Greg came to Tom was because he wants to find out just how thorough this Sam guy is and if he can actually figure out that it was Greg who talked. Now, Tom soon finds out that Shiv is not the only one, though, who wants him to talk to Logan. because that night Jerry and Carl come to him and they try to coerce him into bringing up to Logan that the Pierce deal isn't a good one. And no one thinks that this is a good move, but everybody is scared shitless to actually be the one to bring it to Logan. And before Tom can even talk to him about it, Logan finds out from Jamie that somebody in the Pierce family found out that Logan wanted to buy them and they're skittish now, and he advises him to back off. And somehow that news leaked out. And with this leak and the biography leak, Logan enters the dining room in a really bad mood. And shortly after arriving in the dining room, Tom does find Logan and tells him that he is planning on making a speech because there are some people that don't think the Pierce deal is good, but Tom isn't one of them. He reassures Logan of that over and over again. Before Tom can even make that speech, though, Logan turns all of his hatred towards Frank, and Frank is trying to figure out what the hell's going on. And Logan stands up and announces that somebody has talked to this biographer and somebody has leaked the Pierce deal, and he simply wants to know who is actually behind him on this. He asks who talked to the biographer, and no one's owning up to it. And it's worth mentioning that earlier in the day, Kendall had gone to Roman saying that he heard from the biographer and he was thinking about talking, and he was trying to gauge Roman's interest in that. And Roman, of course, had heard from the biographer as well and says, well, if you talk, then I have to talk because I have to clean up your bullshit. Logan then asks who likes the Pierce deal, and they're all lying to him. As Logan goes around the room interrogating everybody, he comes to Roman, and Roman rats out Kendall for talking to the biographer, but Kendall reveals that he was only doing that to sniff out Roman. Kendall then asks Roman, why don't you tell everybody about the mystery call that you took? But Roman isn't inclined to do that, and he immediately starts deflecting. And Logan is really going above and beyond to humiliate people. He's got Tom, Greg, Carl on their knees, and he's thrown 2 sausages at him, telling them that whoever doesn't get a sausage is the rat. I mean, just really humiliating stuff. And while Tom is getting humiliated, Shiv has gone home with that actor and ends up fucking him. She tells him how she's in an open relationship and classified Tom as an employee, and that employee is oinking like a pig for a sausage in front of her dad. And while Tom is oinking like a pig, Roman is filming the whole thing laughing about it. And Kendall grabs the phone because he wants to find out exactly who Roman was talking to. And of course, Roman is freaking out because he's about to get caught. And Kendall announces to the room that it was Roman who was the one that leaked the deal to Pierce. Roman pleads his case to Logan, saying that he was actually trying to do him a favor by brokering the deal. It would be a nice surprise. But Logan just looks at him and says, "You're a moron." Logan then shouts to the room that he's surrounded by snakes and morons. And once again, who backs me on Pierce? But Kendall tells him, Dad, nobody does. But even though everybody's against this deal, Logan announces that he's still going to go for it and he's going to get it. The next morning at breakfast, Logan apologizes to Frank and really everybody else for the way he acted. And he's got Frank and Kendall at his table. And you find out that Frank has been offered his old job back and he's considering taking it, although he doesn't really know why. Carolina comes up to him and tells him that she found out who was the one who spoke to the biographer. It was a guy named Mo. Now, initially, Logan blows up until he finds out that Mo died last night. And Logan tells her, send Sam over to his house to crack his servers. I want to know what he was telling the biographer. Now, one person noticeably absent from breakfast is Roman. And Jerry heads up to try to see how he's doing, and he's just dejected and says, how do I get my dad to respect me? And Jerry tells him, if you really want to know, do the management training. Start at the ground floor. The group flies out that day, and the decision to bring back Frank is already paying dividends as he's made contact with Pierce's CEO, and he's able to facilitate a meeting between the CEO and Logan. When Tom gets back that night, he tells Shiv what happened and voices his displeasure in being used like a puppet to try to get her way when he didn't agree to it in the first place. And after Shiv and Tom make up, Shiv gets a phone call from Logan, and Logan says, I'm sorry I missed your call. I was dealing with the snakes and the insurgents. And she says, oh, well, not me, Dad, which is a complete lie because she sent Tom to do her bidding. And Logan tells her, let's set a date to bring you in. In episode 4, Tom and Shiv head over to the Waystar building, where there's a little bit of an issue with one of the ATN's anchors being caught at a pro-fascist function a couple of years ago. Videos surfaced, and while Tom doesn't think it's a big deal, Shiv thinks it's a really bad look. And when they arrive at the building, there's a little bit of a protest forming outside. I mean, it's really a total shit show. Shiv walks into her dad's office, and for the day, they're trying to find her a place to set up shop because Kendall hangs out with him with this whole proxy battle situation. And the word that they're going to tell everybody is she's simply there to observe. Shiv heads into a meeting with all the execs to do that observe, where she notices outside Kendall is talking to Logan. And Kendall has learned that Rhea, the CEO of Pierce, is coming over to meet with Logan thanks to Frank and Kendall. But they have to sneak her in because the family isn't aware of this. But Shiv, who is on the inside looking out at this interaction, is starting to get nervous on looking at how her dad interacts with her brother. And she's not the only one, because Kendall, coincidentally, is getting nervous at her sheer presence. But Logan enters the meeting, and the first order on the books is what to do about this ATN anchor, a guy named Ravenhead. Logan's getting shit from everywhere, and there's protests outside, but this guy is a big draw for the station. Sid is the first one to speak up and says, we shouldn't sugarcoat this. The headline is, ATN is under attack. And Shiv, who is supposed to be just sitting there observing, is rolling her eyes because it's clear to her that this guy is simply a fascist. And she can't believe that her husband Tom doesn't see it like that, saying, I've talked down the sponsors, I really feel like we just weather the storm. but Jerry says, well, we can't do that because they found out that Ravenhead just happened to get married at Hitler's retreat in Bavaria. And when Logan hears that, he says, okay, well, is he done? And Shiv signals to Tom that, yeah, he should be done. And Tom says, yeah, okay, he's done. And Kendall, who sees Shiv signaling to Tom, says, whoa, you're supposed to be on the sidelines over there, just, quote, observing. Sid then stops the sibling squabbling and says, we shouldn't fire him because if we cave to this, what's next? So Logan decides to order Tom to basically turn this guy inside out and find out the truth. Is he a fascist or is he not? But at the moment, they're going to back talent. So when Logan orders Tom to do something, Tom orders Greg to do that thing. And when Greg comes to report back to Tom, it's a very uncomfortable scene because Tom is using one of the employees as a footrest. And he encourages Greg to do the same thing, and that's not really what Greg's about. So right off the bat, this meeting is a little bit uncomfortable, but Greg reports back that the only thing he could find is that he might have named his dog after Hitler's dog. And when you combine that with the Bavaria retreat and the video, it's pretty damning. And Tom is trying to convince himself the whole time that maybe it's just a coincidence, but it's not. And after the initial meeting, Shiv went to go talk to Jerry, and she wants to look at the proxy statement, but Jerry says that's going to be tough for you to do. She then wants to go meet with her dad, but his schedule's blacked out and she can't. And she's starting to feel like she's just put in a room with a coloring book like a toddler, especially when a woman comes in and shows Jerry something, and Shiv inquires about what it was, and Jerry doesn't want to tell her. And Shiv goes, come on, it's just me. What happened? And what the woman showed Jerry had to do with Kendall getting caught shoplifting vape fluid. And this is a trend with Kendall. And Shiv is floored because he can buy the entire industry. She then asks Jerry, all right, well, what's the punishment? And she's even more floored to find out that there is none. In fact, they're not even going to bring this to Kendall. Logan just wants it swept under the rug and dealt with. And she's starting to question how many lives Kendall Roy can possibly have. Now, Kendall, by the way, has gone downstairs to greet Rhea, who has snuck into the building. They then head upstairs to meet with Logan, and in the meeting, Kendall starts out with some bullshit reason about why the three are meeting. And Rhea says, all right, let's cut the shit. Everybody knows you're looking to acquire another asset, and I do have a message for you on behalf of the Pierce family. Fuck off. She also correctly predicts that she feels like some banker told Logan that by acquiring Pierce, he would be too big for Stewie and Sandy to take down. The message right now from the Pierces is that they're not interested in selling. Now, while those three were meeting, Tom had to go and figure out if Ravenhead was a fascist or not. And he starts out in the meeting acting like he hates doing these things, but he has to ask these questions. And the first question he asked him is, are you a member of the American Nazi Party? And Ravenhead says, no, that's ridiculous. He then asks about the dog, and he says, well, that's ridiculous too. It's different spelling, admitting that he knows the correct spelling of Hitler's dog. The next question Tom asks him is, have you read Mein Kampf? And Ravenhead says, yeah, a few times. Tom kind of chuckles and says, a few times? What did you miss the first time you read it? Ravenhead explains how he's simply a historian of that time period. All the tragedy. And Tom says, all right, well, what tragedy in particular? And he mentions all the German deaths, the Polish deaths, the Russian deaths, and he kind of forgets the whole 6 million Jews dying. And at this point, it becomes clear that this dude is actually a fascist. But their meeting is interrupted when there's a gunshot in the hallway and panic ensues. All of the executives are taking a separate room, so you've got Greg and Tom in one room, while Logan, Jerry, and Shiv are in a completely other one. And no one's quite sure what exactly happened, how many shooters, if there even was a shooter. And as Shiv is sitting in the room with her dad and Jerry, in walks Rhea because she was trying to leave the building but wasn't able to. And this is the first time that Shiv is seeing Rhea. And she's a little surprised because, the whole meeting was supposed to be under wraps. Now, security has done a really good job of getting the family in private locations because they still don't know who did this. And that includes Roman Roy, who has taken Jerry's advice and joined the management team training. And this is a 6-week course, and he is miserable day one. He's tried to keep a low profile because he feels like it's pretty embarrassing, but he's had to go into one of their parks and dress up as a costumed actor. And then he has to team up with this guy named Brian, who has some good ideas, but let's just say Brian is very confident when maybe he shouldn't be. Either way, Brian is giving a pitch on a ride that him and Roman have come up with when a security guard comes up with a Roman and says, let's get to a secure location. Now, while Roman gets shuttered to a safe location, Tom is getting more and more stressed out being in the room with Greg and not being with Shiv and the others. And it's worth mentioning, by the way, that they have a TV in the room, and the message that Sid said about ATN being under attack is exactly the headline that is currently running on ATN. To make matters worse for Tom, there's rumors that maybe he was one of the targets. So when Greg comes up to him and talks to him about leaving ATN because he's just not really a great fit there, and he would really just like to be moved anywhere else under the Waystar umbrella, Tom snaps at him and throws water bottles saying, you can't do this to me. I will not let you take what's mine. And it's a pretty funny scene because as he's chucking water bottles at him, Greg is begging him to stop saying, you're my best friend. Now, as Greg is trying to ward off the water bottle attack, in the other bunker/room, Logan has learned that it is one shooter, and it was an ATN employee who committed suicide at his desk. But for security issues, they can't let the family leave quite yet. And Rhea's having an issue explaining to people where she is and why she's canceling meetings. And Shiv has noticed the way that Rhea is acting towards what she's seeing on ATN and says, I'll take it you're not taking any offer seriously. And Kendall cuts her off saying, actually, Shiv, Rhea and us had a pretty productive meeting, so we'll take it from here. And Rhea says, well, it was a good chat, but I would say a hard no is the message. And Shiv says, it doesn't really feel right to me either. I mean, I just can't see it. I mean, culturally, politically, your operation is exactly what we lack, but business-wise, it makes no sense. But Rhea disagrees. Business-wise, she feels like that works. It's the incompatible philosophies that are the issue. Kendall speaks up and says there is one thing that could fix that issue. It's $21 billion. Rhea chuckles and says it's not like money isn't relevant to the Pierces, but there's a bigger issue here. This is an emotional matter for them. Kendall then ups the offer to 21.5, and Shiv is amazed that he's allowed to do this. And Kendall is continuing to just bid against himself, upping the offer to $22 billion. She's trying to get her brother to stop saying, I mean, that's not even really the issue, right? And Rhea goes, well, and Shiv says, okay, well then what's the issue? Is it editorial independence? Because there are models in line that could ensure your philosophical approach is protected. And while Shiv is working on the other side of this deal, i.e. the ethics, Kendall and Logan are just upping their number. But he gets sick of doing that and looks at Rhea and says the reality of the situation is we could draw up some agreement with any number of provisions, but I could always break those. So in the end, it's a simple question. Do you trust me? Because if I say I won't fuck Pierce over, do you trust that I won't fuck Pierce over? And more importantly, will you tell them to trust me? Because when I say I'm going to do something, and these kids will tell you, I'm going to do it. So go back to the Pierces and tell them, I'm not going to fuck them over for $24 billion. Both groups are let out of the rooms, and Rhea tells Logan that she will take the number to the Pierces, but suggests that maybe you send them a gift, like a peace offering. That could go a long way. And when Rhea leaves, Logan turns to Kendall and tells him good job, but doesn't say a word to Shiv. He also learned what Mo, whose funeral is that day, told the biographer. And it wasn't that bad. It was just the culture at Waystar was that of bullying. Now, when Greg and Tom got out of their room, Tom apologized to Greg about chucking bottles at him, but Greg is pretty firm on wanting to leave ATN, and he tells him that when Tom had him burn those documents, he saved a few for a rainy day if he ever needed it. And he basically asked Tom in a very nice way if he can blackmail him, and Tom doesn't get mad. He's actually impressed that Greg has become a slimy dirtbag. I mean, he feels like a proud father in this moment. That night, Shiv and Kendall meet up in an office, and Shiv asks Kendall, what's the deal with you and Dad? I mean, do you have a deal with him? And Kendall says, no, there is no deal. She then asks, well, then why is he protecting you? I mean, the drugs, the shoplifting, the whole you trying to take the company over. And he plays dumb, but then asks, well, why do you care so much? I mean, what is this? You're all of a sudden here? I don't know. I mean, maybe he's concerned about me for whatever reason. And she's just amazed that he still can't tell her what is going on. But he reassures her that who's ever taken the company over, it's not going to be him. He then gives her a hug and starts crying on her shoulder. And when he releases, he says, I would just ask that you take care of me. Because if Dad didn't need me, I don't know what I'd really be for. Before he leaves the room, he once again reiterates, yeah, it ain't going to be me. By the end of the episode, it seems like Kendall is in a suicidal state. In episode 5, you learn that the Pierces are going to entertain Logan's offer. But before they hand over their baby, they want to look Logan in the face and figure out if he's actually bullshitting them or not. And because of this, they want to meet the whole family. So Logan calls the whole family for a meeting and goes through the do's and don'ts before they head to the Pierces. And the don'ts include things like don't bring up ATN. If you're going to bring up something, bring up movies, gossip, things like that. Right before Kendall leaves the meeting, Logan tells him, show up an hour late and don't lie about where you were. Oh, and also, make sure you stay sober this week. He then pulls Shiv aside, who thought there was a chance that at this family meeting, she was going to be announced as his successor, but that didn't happen. He does, however, tell her that they're going to let them worry about the bottom feeders and reassures her that he will start integrating her more into decision-making. He does say, I know you don't like this deal, and she says, well, I do see the logic in it, and after all, it will be my baby one day soon. And instead of agreeing with her, he just kind of goes, huh? And walks away. Not exactly reassuring. Logan then catches up with Roman and asks how the business training is going. And Roman says, well, it's bullshit, but it's going pretty good. And Logan says, I'm proud of you for doing it, but by the way, this weekend, don't mention it. It sounds like you're in business kindergarten. And that's exactly how Roman feels. The entire family then gets into a helicopter and helicopters over to meet the Pierces. After an awkward greeting upon arrival, Logan pulls over Rhea and asks for an update. She says, well, there is a wild card because a girl named Naomi has shown up and she usually sits this stuff out. And she tends to have the ear of Nan Pierce, who is the matriarch of the family. And she's the one who's calling the shots. And Logan asks her, will we be able to do a deal without Nan? And that answer is a flat no. And Naomi, of course, was the girl who Tabitha knew that Roman tried to use as a contact to broker a deal with. The families then head inside and have awkward conversations where each side is just very, very two-faced. I mean, just completely different ideologies as they tiptoe around each other. Kendall does as he was told. He shows up an hour late, and when he shows up, Logan goes over and hugs him, but whispers into his ear to target a guy named Peter, because they all have their role to play in who to talk to try to convince them to sell to Waystar. Logan then makes a speech to which everybody who actually knows Logan Roy knows that the speech was complete bullshit and not genuine at all. And there were a lot of faces that were rolling their eyes in the room. Logan then gets his family together and rips into Shiv for making jokes about one of the Pierce family members' attempts to get a doctorate. And the member that she was talking to who she pissed off was already a yes. So Logan's line of thinking is, why were you talking to him in the first place? Now he's pissed off at us. Then he turns attention to Connor because one of the guys that was on the fence about selling was a family member named Max. And Max and Connor have completely opposite political beliefs. But while Max was on the fence, he was leaning towards no sale. So Logan says, cut the shit and get him to our side. He orders the family to simply know their role and stick to it. The family then goes out and has dinner, and the awkward conversation from before carries over to that dinner, including Roman, who's making an ass out of himself talking about these books that he read, but is getting called on the carpet because no one's believing him. And then Connor can't help himself and can't let Mark just simply win these political battles. The conversation then turns to the one area that Logan really didn't want to go to, ATN, and the morality differences between both ATN and PGN. And all the Roys try delicately to dance around the issue, but it's a very uncomfortable situation with Tom in the crosshairs because he's the head of news at ATN. And this awkward conversation crescendos when they ask if PGN is bought, will Tom, the head of ATN, who is the exact opposite of PGN, will be in charge of both news stations. And it gets really quiet, and Logan doesn't answer it, and Tom tries to deflect with humor. The conversation then gets a little more tame, but on one end of the table, you've got Naomi and Roman, and Naomi is talking about their sex life candidly, saying that they don't have sex. And Roman is trying to play it off like she's joking, but she's actually telling the truth, unbeknownst to every one of the guests. But that's not the only relationship that seems to be on the fritz right now, because Marcia is pissed off at Logan and is currently taking it out on him. And she's doing one of those don'ts. She's ordering more wine than she was supposed to. Then does turn the conversation to the fact that he is also trying to be acquired, and he says, oh, that's nothing, we're not even worried about it. And Rhea reveals that it's probably because Sandy is sick. He has syphilis, believe it or not. Nan then asks if he's given any thought to naming a successor, and Kendall cuts in saying, that's pretty forward of you, and she says, well, you're no fun. I mean, we're all friends here. Who's it going to be? And Logan says that while Jerry's currently on the paperwork, even she would be the first to admit that she's not fit for the job. And there is, in fact, a name in mind, but he's not ready to reveal it. And Shiv just blurts out, come on, Dad, I mean, for fuck's sake, tell him it's going to be me. Spilling the beans to the entire table, which includes Roman, who is in management training thinking he could get the job and had no idea and thinks his life is over. And Logan is visibly pissed off at this. When Marcia asks if it's true, Logan snaps at her saying, would you shut up? But Nan seems to be intrigued by the idea that Siobhan could take over one day. After the dinner, Shiv kind of realizes she messed up and runs up to the room with Tom, and Tom wants to know if that was planned, but it wasn't. And now she's worried about the wrath of her father. And Tom is also worried about his job, because how much loyalty is Logan going to have to him if he's mad at Shiv? And Shiv spilled the beans because she was mad about her dad dragging it on and on and on and wanted to get it out there. For her, she felt like she was getting strung along. And Shiv is really worried about the wrath of her dad because she might have just screwed up this deal. Now, in another bedroom, you've got Tabitha and Roman. And Tabitha is making fun of Roman because of the fact they never have sex. And the reality is that he would rather just be emasculated on the phone by Jerry while he jerks off than have actual sex with Tabitha. But feeling the pressure, he says, okay, we can do it, but can we do things a little bit differently? And he tries to have sex with Tabitha as she pretends to be a dead corpse. And that just doesn't really fly with her, and she gets freaked out and goes and jerks off with her electric toothbrush. Roman decides to go visit Jerry in her room and asks for a drink and wants to know if she had any idea about Shiv taking over. And Jerry says, well, she didn't have confirmation of it. She figured it could be a strong possibility. Roman then asks if she has any suggestions for the rest of his life because he feels like it's over. And she responds with the fact that she's getting good reports from the management training, although he doesn't believe they're legit because he is Logan Roy's son. He then asks for one of those private conversations that they have, and she's disgusted with the fact that that's what he came there for, but then gives in and starts ripping him apart as he goes in the bathroom and rubs one out. And to be quite frank, it seems like Jerry's into it. Now, the two black sheep of the family, Naomi and Kendall, get together, and they've bonded over the fact that they're drug addicts, and they go off drinking and snorting coke. They then head over to the helicopter, and she reveals that she only showed up to screw up their deal, but it seems like they're doing a great job of that on their own. They end up hooking up, but afterwards, she explains why she showed up looking to screw up their deal. Because when her mom died, she was going through such a tough time, and it was the Roy family tabloids that were following her all over the place. And she believes it led to her crashing her car, covered in blood, breaking her femur, and she's really never forgiven the publications for that. And Kendall says, well, if you take this deal and you take the money, you can get out of here. And then you're free from all of this. Now, while Kendall had an exciting night, he had, and pardon the pun, a very shitty morning. Because he wakes up to find out that he literally shit the bed, and he has to embarrassingly strip the sheets. When he goes downstairs, he does see Naomi talking to Nan, and at the same time, Rhea is talking to Logan. She's learned that the family had a private meeting, and while she thought she had more time to get in there and skew things over to the Roy side, she simply didn't, and she doesn't know where that family meeting went. But after breakfast, Nan wants to meet with Marcia, Logan, Kendall, Jerry, and Shiv. And all of those people go in to meet with Nan, Naomi, and Rhea, except for Marcia, who Logan claims is taking a walk. Nan starts out the meeting saying while she doesn't really like Logan or his politics, she can't ignore the fact that PGN has had a dip in revenue the past 8 quarters. And after talking to Naomi, Naomi's advice is that she should sell, because that would really be the only way to keep PGN going. She then asks Rhea what she thinks, and Rhea, to Logan's surprise, says, I think we're worth more. And Logan, who is taken off guard, says, I don't really like to be strong-armed, but I could go up to 25. When he does that, it changes Rhea's opinion, and now everybody on the Pierce side is on board to sell. But they have some stipulations. The first being that if they sell, Tom cannot be in charge of news whatsoever. And Logan says that's not a problem. The second is that they keep some board seats, and that's also not a problem. They also want some ironclad editorial protections, and that's also not an issue. But then Nan says, we also want you to name a successor, and that successor is Siobhan Roy. And they want to do it hand in hand with the sale. Because while Shiv is one of them, she's young, a woman, and her political views align more with the Pierces. But that is where Logan has an issue. And without that stipulation, Nan says there's no deal. And Logan would rather walk away from the deal than simply name his daughter, who he told already would be the successor, his successor. Right before he leaves, he says, you know what my favorite Shakespeare quote is? Take the fucking money. The family then gets in the helicopter to fly home, and Shiv wants to talk about what happened, but her dad is just simply glued to his cell phone. He doesn't really care, because he's waiting for PGN to call back and reconsider the offer. And by the time he arrives back in New York City, he gets that call he's been waiting for, and PGN has agreed to sell. They've caved on the final request. Now, the deal still hasn't closed in episode 6 when the family heads to this tech media conference called Argestes. And Logan really wants to close at Argestes, but there's still some minor issues at hand, and he tells Kendall, get this done. And everybody is at Argestes. Stewie, Sandy, Lawrence, Rhea. Hell, even cousin Greg got an invite. And Greg and Tom are going over this talk that Tom is going to be giving. But their talk is interrupted when Logan comes over to ask how Sandy's looking. And they tell him he's looking a little bit frail, I guess. And he says, yeah, the rumor is he has syphilis. But Logan's come over to them to get the inside because he doesn't want to bump into Sandy at all. And he instructs them to keep talking so he doesn't have to talk to him. So they start telling him about ATN's motto that they're going to roll out, which is ATN, we're listening. But in all honesty, Logan doesn't really care. Now, back in New York, Shiv and Frank were the only ones left behind. And while Frank has accepted it, Shiv is very pissed off about it. But she hops on a call when they find out that a story is going to be dropping in the New York Magazine that has to do with their cruise lines. And we're not talking a positive story. The problem is they don't know what is actually in the story. So Logan gets everybody together to strategize about what exactly they're planning on doing with this, because they thought they had 2 weeks until the story came out, when it turns out they likely just have 2 days. Now, Kendall wants to use scare tactics to just scare them off this story, bully them out of it. But Shiv's plan is to agree to cooperate, just ask for more time to stall so they can close this deal, and then tell New York Magazine to go fuck off. After hearing both ideas, Logan decides to side with Kendall, but does want to fly Shiv out to have her there. He does need a plan B, though, and tells Jerry to get Roman to talk to this really, really rich guy with a lot of money, just in case the PGN move falls through. So Jerry approaches Roman and says, you see that guy over there? That's Edward Kazgarov. Your dad wants you to go talk to him. He could be our white knight. But Roman doesn't approach him right then and there. He waits that night to approach him at a party. And at that same time when Roman was getting instructions from Jerry, Kendall saw Stewie and started bragging to him that they have a deal in place so large that it'll be impossible for Stewie and Sandy to acquire them. But because he got burned by Kendall a couple months ago, he simply doesn't believe him. That night, most of them go to a party, and Greg and Tom show up, and Greg's found out that there's a little bit of an issue with the slogan, ATN, we're listening. And that issue is the fact that they are actually listening. They're using your microphones to listen and accumulate data to figure out what you actually want to watch. And it would be a really bad look for Tom to get up there and say, ATN, we're listening, and then it comes out later down the line that they were actually listening. So the two brainstorm outside of the club and figure out that a better slogan might be, ATN, we here for you. Tom then walks in the party and starts talking to a girl named Rhea, and as he's doing so, Shiv comes up to his utter surprise, because he had no idea that she was flying in. Shiv fills Tom in on the story that's probably going to come out and why she's arrived at our Jestes, but then asks, were you just trying to have sex with Rhea? And Tom plays it off like he wasn't, but says, well, according to our agreement, that would be allowed, right? But Shiv doesn't see it like that because she actually knows Rhea, or at least knows of her, or at least has a face to the name, whereas the actor that she slept with last week, Tom has no idea what that guy looks like. And Tom comes around to her line of thinking, but still is acting like he wasn't trying to have sex with Rhea. Now, this was the same party that Roman approached Edward at, and that night he heads to Jerry's room to let her know exactly what he would possibly want. And it's a news network that is all independently run journalists that can really just push his propaganda. But he's playing it off like it's no outside interest news. He then brings up an idea that he's had, because Jerry is currently in line. If anything were to happen to Logan, she would take over, even though it's been made clear to her that she really wouldn't. But she is currently on the paperwork. So what if they teamed up? And what if Roman was the CEO in basically name only, but Jerry would be the extremely well-compensated person behind the curtain actually pulling the strings? She doesn't give him an answer and just says it's late, and she kicks him out. The next day, Nan arrives at Argestes at the behest of Rhea because it's been made clear to Rhea that Logan really wants to close at Argestes. And both Rhea and Nan head over to meet Kendall and Logan at breakfast, but Logan isn't feeling so great. And to make matters worse for Logan, he finds out that Kendall's plan to bully them backfired. And instead of waiting 1 to 2 days to print the story, they could be coming out any minute. So when Nan shows up, they try to close the deal right then and there, but Nan isn't really interested and says there's still some things they'd like to iron out. And while she's talking, the story ends up dropping. And when it drops, Kendall and Logan end up leaving, and they weren't the only ones who found out because Rhea got a text alert about it. Logan then gets the family together to read about it, and while the story's not great, it's also extremely vague. And it basically goes back to one girl and one girl only, with just a lot of scary words. And it paints the picture of a dancer being pressured by Mo, the guy who died, forcing her to have sex with him in order to renew her contract. And if you didn't, you might have been killed. At least that's the picture they're painting. There was also talk of NDAs being signed, and if you didn't, you might have been killed. Once again, that's the picture they're painting. And the only one that doesn't really think this is a big deal is Roman, because he's saying that in comparison to everything else that's come out the past couple of years, this is a little bit tame. And Logan tends to agree with him, saying that this is nothing more than people coming for him because it's his turn to take a beating. They then try to figure out what to do about a response and also how this factors into the Pierce deal. Because while Nan really likes money, she also likes ethics and morals. They also discuss whether it'd be a good move to cancel the panel that Roman and Kendall were going to speak at. But they think, no, that would be a bad look. They then discuss maybe it'd be a great look to have Shiv join that panel because she's a woman, but Shiv doesn't want to because she hasn't been briefed on the deal. Even though Logan says, well, it'd be great to have you, we could use you, but if you don't want to, we can't make you. Logan then gets ready to do the walk of shame, and as he's doing so, Jerry is updating him on his schedule, opening up because everybody is canceling all the dinners and plans that he had. Right now, Logan Roy is toxic. And on that walk of shame, Stewie ends up running into Kendall and brags that, well, if you did have a deal in place, it's gotta be dead by now. Logan and Shiv then go to meet with Jamie Laird to find out what the latest is with the Pierce deal, but he hasn't heard from them, and suggests that maybe it'd be wise to get Shiv to reach out, because of the fact that they really like Shiv. And maybe it was the altitude, maybe it's the deal, maybe it's the story coming out, but Logan gets sick at the table and just starts puking his guts out. Later in the day, though, Shiv does go talk to Rhea, as previously suggested, because while Rhea wasn't getting back to Jamie, she actually reached out on her own to Shiv, because she wants to find out exactly what is going on with the company and the cruise lines and the piece and what's the real story here. Because Nan is quite unhappy. And Shiv says, well, if she has any fears, I am here. I will answer your questions. And Rhea says, well, our first question is, was any of your girls killed on any cruise ships? Shiv says no, but the fact that that question is being posed is a bad look. Rhea says, I like your dad, but what kind of problems are we facing here? Are we in the middle of the storm? Are we at the end of the storm? Or is this simply the first raindrop? Because the truth is that this deal is currently in the balance. But if they feel like this was just a few bad apples a bunch of years ago, then maybe the deal can be salvaged. And Shiv reassures her that that will be the message. Right before the meeting wraps up, Rhea tells Shiv that Nan will be coming to her panel that night, but Shiv tells her, I'm actually not talking, I wasn't briefed. And Rhea says, well, can you get briefed? Because Nan tends to get cold feet, and you guys can't buy us. And Shiv is worried about the optics of appearing on that panel, but realizes that to get the deal done, she's going to have to. So with about 10 minutes before they hit the stage, she walks in and says that she's reconsidered and she will be joining the panel, but Roman and Kendall don't want her. Shiv tells Logan, in all honesty, I don't even need these two. I'll do the whole thing without being prepped. But both Roman and Kendall take offense to that. But then I suggested that maybe Shiv bump one of them, and that one would be Roman, although he puts up a fight about that. And after some bickering and squabbling, Logan decides that all three kids will go up, and they are following Tom's presentation on his catchy new slogan, ATN, We here for you. Yeah, no, it's terrible. So all of the Roy kids, sans Connor, go on stage, and Rhea shows up unaware of where Nan is, who is actually watching the panel in the back row. And of course, the first question has to do with the cruise line story. And both Kendall and Shiv try to take the lead on answering the question, as the two go back and forth in explaining the company's position, as Roman sits there, not saying a word until he finally pipes up and says, "We'll do anything the public wants." But Shiv looks really good in this presentation. She does, although, compare her dad to a dinosaur. And when the panel gets over, she learns that Logan did take offense to that remark. And Kendall and Roman start ganging up on her about how she crossed the line. And as Roman is standing next to Logan, calling him an old dinosaur, Logan backslaps the shit out of him. Now, this is the final night of our Jestys, and they always have a comedian come in to roast everybody there, which Marcia doesn't understand why they would show up to an event where they just get insulted. And you gotta forgive her because she doesn't really have a sense of humor. And with this story coming out that day, the comedian goes in on the Roy family. And normally it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but he's saying things like doing deals with Waystar right now is like doing deals with the Hindenburg as it's going down. And Nan is listening to all of this until finally it gets to the point where she gets up and leaves, and Logan follows her out. Rhea also follows the two outside, and Logan wants to discuss with Nan about the deal, and she says, well, if you really want to discuss it, the deal is off. Logan and Rhea are both trying to tell her that this is a good deal, and then she turns her attention to Rhea saying, have you ever met with Logan Roy about this without my knowing? Because she's found out that the day of that shooting, Rhea was there behind her back talking about a sale of PGM. And Nan feels swindled and demands that Rhea hand in her resignation and then walks off. She gets in the car, and as the car is driving away, Logan Roy is chasing after it, banging on the window, screaming, we're not done here. But, unfortunately, Nan is. In episode 7, the whole family shows up at Logan's place, including Shiv, who's looking for answers to find out if she's still in the plans to take over the company. She recently put out a memo with ideas she had, and she hasn't heard back from her father. At this same party, Jerry approaches Roman about his plan, saying that if she were to do it, she'd have to do a deep dive into all of the deplorable things that he's done in his lifetime, because that could come back to bite them if they were to go after the CEO position. But they're interrupted when Logan calls Jerry, Roman, and Kendall upstairs because Sandy and Stewie have put out a smear campaign to all of the high shareholders, trying to get them to flip from voting for Logan to voting for Sandy and Stewie. And the issue is, it's kind of working. Some of the important shareholders are thinking about switching allegiances, including Logan's ex-wife, who happens to be the kid's mom. And Frank suggests maybe it's a good idea if all of the kids were to fly to London and try to convince her to vote for Logan. And they could kill two birds with one stone, because Logan can meet up with a guy named Jack, who also holds a lot of shares, because Jack is also on the fence. Logan thinks it's a great idea, and he wants everybody to go except Shiv. So everybody in the group that's supposed to go to London heads to the airport, including Logan, who gives a ride to Roman. And in that car ride, he kind of apologizes for smacking him, but then kind of doesn't. When they arrive at the plane, Roman is surprised to see Rhea on board, and she was invited by Logan because he wants to get her opinion on who she thinks could actually take over the company out of all of his kids. Logan is looking for some outside eyes on this, and Rhea says, well, Shiv thinks that she's smarter than she is, and Roman could be good, but he's nowhere near ready. And Kendall, it's like he has all the cards but doesn't play any of them. And both Kendall and Roman are in the front of the plane watching the two talk, noticing how their dad is acting and wondering if the two are having an affair. They then are called in because Logan wants to talk about Shiv's memo, and they start ripping it apart. Roman says that it's pious bullshit. Kendall makes fun of the fact that she had quotes from St. Thomas Aquinas and Amelia Earhart, but Logan wants to get to the actual meat of the memo. And Roman does say that it's a nice rich gumbo of ideas in there, and Rhea pops in saying that you can't blame her for what she did because she's never run a major company before. She just has a lack of experience. Now, while they're all in the air ripping apart her memo, Shiv is trying to get a hold of her dad unsuccessfully, and she goes to his office to find out that he fled the country. And at this point, she feels like she's getting the runaround, not just from him, but from his staff as well. Her husband, meanwhile, has to go meet with the independent investigators about this cruise line fiasco because he was at one point in charge of the cruise lines, and he thought that they were just going to be lobbing softball questions at him, but he finds out that that's far from the case, and they're wondering about any documents that might have been destroyed that they need. And of course, he did have Greg burn some pretty important documents, so he heads to his apartment that night and says, I need the documents that you are holding on to. And Greg is reluctant to give up those documents because he feels like it's an insurance policy, but Tom says you don't need insurance at this point. You got what you wanted. So Tom actually decides he's going to stay the night and accompany Greg into the office to grab the documents that he was holding there. so that he can make sure that they are destroyed. Because while Tom likes Greg, he doesn't trust him at this point because he doesn't trust anybody. That night in London, Logan and Rhea are drinking after dinner, and Logan reveals that after Shiv found out that he blew her off once again, she boarded a flight to London and she'll be arriving tomorrow morning. And he's starting to question whether she actually is fit to take over this company. The fact is, he doesn't know what to do, and Rhea agrees to help him with that matter, and then the two end up spending the night together. But when Kendall and Roman wake up the next day, a story is on the front page of one of the London newspapers, and it has to do with the family of the guy who died in the car crash that Kendall was a part of in season 1, and they're painting a picture that it was actually Logan's fault because he was bullying the kid, and that's what led the guy to crash his car. So they wake up Logan, and they get all of the brain trust on the phone to figure out what they're going to do about this. And this newspaper is one of Sandy's newspapers, so he's trying to once again stir up negative publicity about Logan Roy that could muddy the waters with the shareholders. And the group back in the States lets Logan know that all the family really wants an apology, but he doesn't want to give one. But the issue is, they're thinking about coming over stateside and doing some interviews, so if an apology can kill that, it's probably best to just give them an apology. And then there's also the issue of the Proxy war. It's not great optics right now, but if he goes and visits the family and apologizes, maybe they can spin the narrative and get the family to admit that he wasn't liable in any way whatsoever, and now it's going to look like Sandy was just trying to dig up bad memories from a family who was mourning the loss of their son. So after hearing all that, Logan decides, alright, I will apologize. After they get off the phone, Roman asks Logan if he had a fun night, and Logan takes offense to it, but one guy who did have a fun night was Kendall, because he is still talking to Naomi Pierce, and they hooked up, and she walks out of one of the bedrooms, to the surprise of not just Roman, but also Logan as well, who had no idea that Kendall was still talking to her. Logan asks her to leave because he wants to strategize with both of his sons about what they're going to say to their mother, and Logan tells the boys that he's willing to open up the divorce settlement, and his max number is 50 mil, but start off with 10. So Roman gets his marching orders and leaves, and now it's just Kendall and Logan in the same room, and Kendall starts asking if it's really a good idea he get involved with Rhea, and he better be careful because there is a possibility that he's getting played. He does so very delicately, but Logan doesn't appreciate it. And even though Kendall has plans that day with Naomi, Logan forces him to come along and apologize with the family. So when Logan and Kendall head out to go apologize, that's coincidentally when Shiv shows up. And the only person there is Roman. And she asks, where's Dad? And finds out that he once again isn't there. And Roman starts making fun of her memo and says, yeah, we all read it. Dad read it. He read it a couple days ago. He hasn't gotten back to you about it. And this is really stressing Shiv out, but then she gets a phone call from Rhea who wants to meet with her. And the beginning of the conversation is a little awkward because Rhea is tiptoeing around the fact that she slept with Logan. And she's kind of asking permission, even though they're all adults. They then turn the conversation to Shiv's career. Rhea tells her that she's very smart and talented, but Shiv says, that's great, but what does my dad think? And Rhea suggests maybe it's time that she let her dad know that she has options. Because Pierce is now looking for a CEO because they forced Rhea to resign. And Rhea knows that they were a big fan of Shiv, and she can get that name into the right hands, and it could force Logan's hand. And maybe she uses it to leverage into the CEO job at Waystar, or maybe she just takes the deal with Pierce. And it's an interesting proposition, and Shiv says, I'll think about it. Shiv then heads over to her mom's place, and she meets Roman there. And their mom's prepared dinner, but she says, let's just get right down to negotiations. Because their mom knows exactly why the kids are there. They haven't been there in forever. So she asks, what's your dad's max number? And Roman says, well, he told me to start at 10, but his max number is 40. And she says, okay, I'll tell you what. I either want the Hamptons house, or I want 20 million and all you kids come to visit me on Christmas. So give your dad those two options and he can choose. Now, Kendall couldn't make it to dinner because he was with Logan visiting the family of the guy who was killed. And at first he just thought he could wait in the car, but Logan forces him actually in the house. And he becomes very uncomfortable looking at pictures of this guy, and the guilt is just all over his face. Now, he never actually talks to the parents, but when Logan is leaving, he asks his dad, do you think I should? And he says, no, come on, let's go. Later that night, he returns to the house and just puts a large amount of cash through the mail slot. Then he heads over to his mom's house. And he wants to get the fact that he killed somebody off his chest, but his mom says it's late, and if you're going to tell me about something heavy like that, maybe we should just wait till the morning. You can tell me over breakfast. And he says, yeah, you're probably right. But when he wakes up at breakfast, he doesn't find his mom. He simply finds a note apologizing for not being there because she had a lot of stuff to do. So Kendall is unable to get that stuff off his chest. Now, that same night, Tom was very busy because he got the documents, and along with Greg, he went to go burn them. But unbeknownst to Tom, Greg didn't want to give up his insurance policy. So he put his cell phone in his pocket and started recording it loudly, saying how they were burning documents that Tom forced him to burn that were confidential documents and included Waystar hush money. But when Tom goes to burn them, the lighter that he's using doesn't work, so he has to go inside and grab some matches. And that's when Greg dips in the fire pit and frantically grabs a couple pieces of paper and sticks them away. Tom does return with the matches and lights lights all the rest of the papers on fire, but Greg has a little bit of his insurance policy back. The next morning, Shiv finally gets a hold of her dad, and her dad denies ever running from her, and then lies about the fact that he read her memo, admitting though that he does need to give her a response. She gets up to leave but says, no, I need to know. Am I still in your plans to take over this company? Because you know I can do this and I want this. And Logan looks at her and says, well, then why are you fucking me? Shiv acts like she has no idea what he's talking about, and he says, why did you float your name to Pierce for the CEO position? And this surprises Shiv, and she says, who told you? And he says, it's all over town. Nan Pierce is running around acting like it's a trophy. Shiv says that she needs to keep her options open, but Logan says, what, we have one squabble and then you go to that? We're family, Shiv. I wasn't expecting that. And Logan is pissed. He then heads to the airport with everybody except Shiv, and on the plane, Roman lets him know that the deal is going to be $20 million and Christmas, and Logan is thrilled about that. And then Roman and Kendall go to the front of the plane, and now it's just Logan and Rhea. And Logan thanks Rhea for getting him the information about Shiv, because that entire conversation between Rhea and Shiv was a setup. He then tells Rhea maybe it'd be best to get me 2 or 3 outside names for my successor, and she says, I'd be happy to help. But at that same time, Kendall gets a phone call from Shiv asking, is she on the plane? And he says, yeah. And Shiv lets him know, we might have an issue, because I'm pretty sure I just got fucked by her. In episode 8, the family heads over to Scotland on the heels of Willow and Connor's play opening up on Broadway, and they're going there because they're visiting Logan's hometown because he's being honored. And during their trip, Rhea has taken it upon herself to throw a massive surprise party for Logan. And right before the family leaves on the plane, Shiv is trying to garner support that Rhea must be stopped. On the plane ride, however, Logan is lamenting the fact that he has to go over, and Jerry says, we can cancel, but he says, no, this will be a good platform to name my successor. He then gets interrupted by Carolina, who says, we do have an issue. There's a former accountant in Cruises who's about to blow the lid off of a scandal. He knows about the shadow logs, he knows where the bodies are buried, he knows it all, and he's gotten spooked because of a lawsuit. Logan gets pissed off thinking that this situation was already handled and instructs them to have Sam give him the talk that his life will be destroyed and just to pay him off and make it go away. He then asks if Rhea knows and she doesn't. He says, good, I want to keep it that way. The group arrives in Scotland and it becomes apparent that Logan doesn't really feel comfortable there. He hasn't been back there in years and doesn't really want to go on this trip. And when they arrive at the hotel, he's pretty cantankerous. Now, when they do arrive at the hotel, this is the first time that Shiv is able to talk to Rhea since she backstabbed her. And she says, are you one of those people that can't look someone in the eye after you fuck them? And Rhea continues to tell her that she acted in good faith and she had no idea that her dad would respond that way. Shiv then confronts her about putting names together for the CEO position and says, are you going to be on that list? And since it is a small pool to select from, she will be. And Shiv says, I wonder which way you're leaning. Me, who wants to kill you, or you, who's looking for a second chance at a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Yeah, let me know about that. Now, Shiv isn't the only one who's concerned about Rhea, because Roman asked Jerry if she's heard anything, and Jerry does say that Frank is concerned that this one seems different from all the past women. Logan seems to be lacking focus right now, and the shareholder vote is going to be very close. And if the board gets replaced, it's going to be a clean sweep. So Jerry has taken it upon herself to invite Edward Asgarov in the hopes that Roman can meet with him and possibly seal that deal. Because right now, they need options. But while Shiv and Roman are worried about Rhea taking over the company, Marcia is worried about Rhea being Mr. Steal Your Man. And she confronts her about it, asking if she's tested regularly for STDs, because Marcia and Logan still sleep together, and she has no idea who Rhea is sleeping with. Rhea thinks this is very inappropriate, but Marcia lets her know that she's won some battles and she's lost some battles. But when she's lost, the other person always ends up losing an eye. The uncomfortable conversation is broken up by Logan, who wants to talk to Rhea and get an update. And Rhea lets him know that there's a little bit of turbulence going on right now and rats out both Marcia and Shiv. And Shiv just wants to mess with her at this point. And at cocktail hour, she has Kendall float the name Rose to her, who is somebody from Logan's past that he doesn't like to bring up. And during a toast that Rhea gives, she first toasts Logan's mom, and then she toasts, quote, his sister Rose. And immediately she knows that that was probably not the best name to give. But that's not where the bullying stops, because the kids continue to go at Rhea, mentioning her mother's political views, which are the exact opposite of the Roy family's, and her drinking issue, or I should say lack thereof. All the while trying to paint the picture that she isn't what she seems in front of Logan. Later that day, they're supposed to do a press tour where Logan shows up at his childhood home, and as they're waiting for Logan to show up, Jerry goes over to Shiv and lets her know that they have an issue with the accountant. He's not taking their money, so she's going to double the offer, but she doesn't want to go to Logan about this and worry him. So she's come to Shiv to get the okay, and Shiv agrees. Logan does eventually show up, but instead of getting out and taking pictures in the house, he just looks at it and says, okay, I saw it, and drives off. They then head over to a school where they're naming the journalism wing after Logan Roy. And at the dedication, his brother, who is Greg's grandfather, shows up, and the two have a civil conversation at first, but once Logan is called away, that's when his brother starts going in on him to Greg. And he tells Greg that if you don't stop working for Logan, I'm going to cut you out of my will. And if Greg is cut out of the will, he's going to lose $250 million. So it puts Greg in a tough situation. Now, one person who wasn't at the school dedication was Roman, who was met up with Edward at a local bar. And Edward is watching soccer because it's one of his favorite sports, although Roman couldn't care less about it. Roman is trying to discuss business with him, but he does notice the two teams playing and says that the one team, the Hearts, were his dad's childhood team. And this is really the only Scottish thing that Logan loves. So Edward proposes that the two buy the team. And Roman's all for it, even though he doesn't know anything about soccer and couldn't care less about the sport. After his trip at the bar with Edward, he heads back to meet with his brothers and Shiv has had enough of Rhea and is trying to get support that she needs to go. The issue is, Rhea has gotten every single one of them on her side, sweet-talking all of them, and it's blowing Shiv's mind that they can't see through it. And in their opinion, she's just jealous of the fact that she's about to lose the company that she thought she was going to inherit. But according to Connor and Kendall, maybe it's best that they do have an outside voice control the company. So while she's lost her siblings, she thinks she has her husband in the bag until she talks to him about it and learns that Tom is also on Team Rhea because it's best for his future if maybe Rhea controls things as opposed to his own wife. And while this is shocking to Shiv, she does tell him, I was promised the gig of CEO, and I'm still going to fight for it, whether you like it or not. Everybody then go inside and waits for Logan to show up, and when he does, they surprise him, but he hates that. He immediately storms outside, shocked at what he just saw, and Marsha lets him know that Rhea thought it was a good idea, so they go back inside and they start mingling with people. And one of those people is Kendall's new fling, an actress from Connor and Willow's play that he hooked up with and then flew out to be there. And Kendall Roy is smitten. I mean, he's fallen hard for this girl. So Kendall goes and introduces her to his dad, and Logan gives her the time of day, but then walks over and starts talking to Shiv, saying, have you seen Kendall's new girl? And they both agree that it probably won't last. They then agree to have a truce for the night, and she gives him a present of a book with a bunch of pictures of all the houses they've ever owned. But he's not really in the right mindset because his big concern right now is Rhea and if he actually did get played. She just doesn't appear to be who she said she was. And it's freaking him out, the fact that he was lied to, even about small details like her drinking, but then also the fact that she had all of his contacts and he didn't even know this party was coming. So he's starting to second guess whether Rhea would actually be good at the CEO job. Jerry comes over and interrupts and wants to go over the itinerary for the rest of the party, and he says, let me go to the bathroom first. And in the bathroom, he's approached by cousin Greg, who is dealing with the issue of his grandfather telling him, you either quit working for Logan or you continue to and not get your inheritance. So Greg dances around the issue but says, it's been fun, but I have to resign because of my grandfather. And Logan says, look, your grandfather's a pussy. That's why he's never made anything of himself. He's not going to cut you out of his will, so you can choose whether you want to be with the fun uncle or you want to be with Grandpa Grumps. And then he walks out. Now, while he was in the bathroom, Jerry has congregated with Hugo, Sid, Shiv, Frank, and Carolina to give the latest about the accountant gone rogue. And the accountant isn't taking any of their offers, to the point where they actually said, give us a number, and he wasn't taking one. And it's become apparent that somebody's got to be backing him on this. And it's probably Sandy, but it could be any one of the number of people who wants to take Waystar down, and that list is very, very long. And the issue they have is, when do we tell Logan about this? Because it's all likely to come out. The shadow logs, the NDA. I mean, he's even talking about going on national television and blowing the lid off this thing. And this is going to cause a disaster for whoever Logan names as CEO, and that's when Shiv realizes she has an opportunity. So she tells the group, don't tell my dad tonight, let him enjoy it, we'll tell him tomorrow. The group then disperses because they have a couple of tributes they want to do for Logan, one of which, by the way, and it has nothing to do with the plot, but it can't be understated, is a rap from Kendall, which was cringeworthy because of the fact that he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. So after the notorious KEN drops some bars, they then have a video tribute from all of the kids. And that's when Roman comes over with Edward and says, we got you a gift, Dad. We bought you your favorite team, Hearts. And Logan tells him, I don't like Hearts. He liked a team called Hibs. And Roman has the audacity to say, I'm pretty sure it's Hearts. But Logan says, no, yeah, you're probably right. I mean, how would I possibly know what team I've rooted for my entire life? So after Roman makes an ass out of himself, Shiv walks over and Logan voices his concern over Rhea, and Shiv talks him back into Rhea, saying that maybe it is time they go outside and just to follow your gut. So that's what Logan does. He gets up there on the podium and announces that Rhea will be the next CEO of Waystar. And of course, unbeknownst to her, she has a tidal wave that's about to hit her. But a few people had no idea about this, including Kendall, who is so thrown off by that he has security put that actress on the next flight home. And then there's Marsha, who also had no idea that he was going to make this announcement. And Marsha is pissed. She tells Logan that she's bored of him and leaves before the unveiling of the plaque, which she calls his tiny tombstone. And after Marsha leaves, his brother comes over and starts going in on him, saying it's hard to figure out what's more toxic, your newspapers or your cruise lines. I mean, all of those years blaming yourself for Rose, and that wasn't even your fault. But this is your fault. This empire of shit that you've created. And you know what? It's time to pay up. And then he just walks off. Logan then gets on stage and unveils the plaque. In episode 9, the whole family gets together to watch the whistleblower who has decided to take his story public on the news. And all of the details are stuff that we already knew, but now that they're public, it's a really bad look. To the point where Logan can't even finish the story, walking out of the room saying, I have teams of people to watch this and figure out my response. I'm leaving. But after the story is done, he does convene with his team to figure out what they're going to do. And Jerry points out maybe the best course of action is to be honest. Mo is dead, so blame him on all of this. Say the family knew nothing about this, and then give up Bill, who was in charge of the cruise lines before Tom, because unfortunately, they're going to need to sacrifice somebody. But when Shiv gets there, she drops a bombshell because she's found out that 2 senators are planning to call the company to the Senate floor, and it's her old buddy Gil and another senator named Gilliard. And Hugo points out maybe we can keep Logan out of this. Maybe we just have Jerry and Tom get up, because Jerry is head of lead counsel, and Tom is currently in charge of the cruises. But Carolina lets them know that no, they're going to want to talk to Logan no matter what. And unfortunately, with the shareholder meeting being just 2.5 weeks away, they're going to have to go to Washington and speak. So because of that shareholder meeting, Logan pulls Roman aside and asks that he go and talk to Edward about possibly getting his money to take the company private. He asks Roman if he can do it, and while Roman says, yeah, I can tell you I can do it, he really doesn't have faith that he will actually be able to get the deal done because the deal is so massive. And as he's leaving to get this $10 billion deal over, he runs into Rhea, who has seen the story and is not pleased because she feels like she just got bamboozled. Like she's about to be the fall guy in this whole operation, even though Logan tells her that it'll be all right and he really didn't have any idea how deep this thing went. She tells Logan that the magazine was one thing, but this is completely different. And she's starting to feel like she was used as kind of a shield between Logan and the shareholders that were possibly going to flip. Right before she leaves, Logan assures her that it's really nothing, but that doesn't really put her mind at ease at all. The next day, the family shows up at Washington to speak to the Senate, and they end up running into Bill, who they didn't invite there, and they're shocked to see because they were planning on throwing Bill under the bus, and they don't really want to see this guy when they're about to execute him on C-SPAN. But he lives in the area, and he says, well, I'm a team player, right? So I'm here to support you guys. Good luck. And while Shiv and Jerry and Tom, they all act like they're happy to see him, they're not. Now, the plan is to have Jerry and Tom testify first to take some of the heavier questions off Logan and to help the team prepare as to what kind of questions they'll be facing. After they're done talking, Kendall and Logan will then speak. Now, one person not in attendance is Roman, who has flown over to Scotland to watch the Hearts practice along with Edward, and he says, I'm going to just cut to the chase. Can you and your dad help us go private? And Edward says, yeah, no, we can, and we're very interested in your company and interested in adding it to our portfolio. Can you come to Turkey tomorrow and pitch my father? And Roman agrees, and he's not alone. He's brought Jamie and Carl with him to help with this. So the next day, all 3 of them head to Turkey, and as Roman is making his pitch, a couple of guys walk in the room with AK-47s, and Roman is completely thrown off. He has no idea who these guys are, and to make it worse, his security just left. Now, Edward and his team are telling him it's okay, but we have to go with these guys, and Roman's a little concerned because he doesn't know who these guys are. When they get down to the hotel lobby, he gets even more nervous because these guys with guns aren't letting people leave. And Edward lets him know that the guys with guns are a part of a group that is against corruption, and unfortunately, with the hotel being flush with investors, they're basically held hostage. So everybody's going to be there for a while. And with nowhere to go and really nothing to do, the group starts playing cards. But Edward does come over and lets them know some good news. Nobody's getting shot. And also, they are interested in the deal. There's just a few concerns. The first being, will the government allow the outside investment? And Roman lets him know about the power that Logan has in Washington. The second concern is the fact that they're under pressure from another bid. And Roman lets him know that that won't be a problem because if the money's big enough, they can close before the shareholder meeting. So it seems like on the surface, they have an agreement. But shortly after Edward leaves, somebody comes out and asks for everybody who's a foreign national to raise their hand. And Roman does that, and he says, Roman Roy, come with us, and they take Roman away. Now, back in Washington, Jerry and Tom are about to take the floor, and Tom is nervous as hell, even though he's been prepped. And he had reason to be nervous, because when he gets up there, Gil, Shiv's old employer, rips him to shreds going after him about Lester's nickname being Mo. And why was it that Tom was referring to him as Mo to everybody else, but when he emailed Lester, he never once referred to him as Mo? And the real story is Mo's nickname was Mo because his real name was Lester, Mo Lester. Although this was a nickname behind his back. And Tom plays it off like, well, his nickname was Mo because he was skeevy, but the nickname was actually based in fact. And that's the point that Gil is trying to make. Gil then points out that there's a lot of paper documents as well as files that have been disappeared from the time in history that they want to investigate. And Jerry lets him know that there's just a lot of documents that were destroyed in typical corporate housekeeping. But Gil asks if there was a targeted cover-up because on Thanksgiving of last year, a Gregory Hirsch took out a large number of documents that are unaccounted for. And then he turns to Tom and says, do you know who Gregory Hirsch is? And Tom lies to him saying he doesn't. He then retracts that statement saying, oh yes, no, I do know Greg Hirsch. But it is a terrible look and Tom is drowning. It crescendos when Gil asks if Tom has ever used any human being as a footstool, to which Tom says he has different methods of motivation. I mean, Tom could not have looked any worse in this. And when he gets back in the conference room with all of the family and advisors, he's flipping out thinking that he's been labeled as a patsy. Greg is also freaking out because he told his grandfather last night that he will continue to work for Logan, costing him $250 million, and now he's worried that he could go to jail for this. And Logan, of course, is frustrated because Tom just shit the bed on C-SPAN. Kendall then asks Shiv if she can go talk to Gil and find out what's coming down the pipeline, because anything else like this, and the company's probably done for. So Shiv does that and finds out some pretty bad news, that they have another person they're planning on testifying. She's a former entertainment manager who worked under Lester, and she knows where all the bodies are buried and has testimonies and knows about the NDAs, and she's being prepped to speak on Friday. And she could really be the death nail for Waystar. And while they're discussing this, Rhea comes in to wish the team good luck, but finds out that they have a bomb that's about to drop on them. Hugo finds out that the accuser was found by Senator Gilliard, and Rhea just so happens to be friendly with Gilliard. So Logan asks her, is there any way that we can possibly talk to the accuser, apologize, find out what she wants? And Rhea is like, are you kidding me? And Kendall points out that they have to try because she could change the entire narrative. So Logan orders that Shiv and Rhea head off and speak to her. So the two head off as Kendall and Logan get ready to speak to the Senate. And immediately Gil goes after Logan asking what he knew, but Logan passes the buck to Kendall, saying that he was in charge during that period of time. And Kendall does a great job spinning the narrative on Gil, saying that this has nothing to do with Gil trying to clean up the cruise line industry, but more has to do with the fact that Gil is trying to get back at his old nemesis, Logan Roy. This is nothing more than a vendetta because ATN isn't very kind to Gil, the newspapers aren't kind to Gil, and this is just a senator with a vendetta trying to get his. Kendall finishes it off with challenging Gil to come after them because they have nothing to hide. And that is the narrative that the group will use for the entire week. They have nothing to hide, come and get us. And while Kendall is shining on C-SPAN, Rhea and Shiv have arrived to go talk to the accuser, but Rhea lets her know that I'm not going in there. And Shiv, you don't have to either if you don't want to. And Shiv says, well, no, I kind of do, because if I don't, and she's convincing enough, my family loses its company. So she finds the accuser and starts talking to her, and initially the woman is a little bit hesitant to talk to Shiv because she thought she was talking to Rhea. Shiv reassures her that she's not going to threaten her, she's not going to offer her money, she just wants to talk and listen. She tells the woman that if she does this, she's going to be labeled a slut and a whore by a lot of people for the rest of her life. Anytime her name is Googled, this is the narrative that's going to come up. And it's not from Shiv, it's just from the public. Shiv then goes on to admit that she doesn't trust her dad, but she thinks with the help of the accuser, she can clean up this industry and make it one of the cleanest companies around. The woman asks if she can trust Shiv, and Shiv says, no, you can't. The reality is you can't trust anybody right now, because I have my agenda, and the people that want you to speak, they have their agenda. So what you have to do is figure out what's best for you. What's your agenda? Because I can help you clean this up. And that little pep talk works. All of the advisors, along with the family, get together that night to kind of celebrate because it seems like they're out of the weeds a little bit. And the first person that approaches Logan is Bill. And Logan thanks him for his support, and he says, oh, of course. I mean, I have so many memories. I should write a book. I could. I mean, I have the diaries, but no time. And it's definitely taken as a threat. Logan then sees Shiv and thanks her for getting the accuser to rethink talking to the Senate. But then he finds out that Rhea wants to have a talk, because Rhea is done. This isn't exactly what she signed up for, and she's leaving. Logan is a little surprised and taken off guard, but Rhea simply doesn't want to do business with him anymore and walks off. So they now once again have a hole at the CEO position. And later that night, Logan and Shiv are talking about the day over drinks. And Shiv asks Logan if he thinks that they're actually through this or not. And he says, honestly, no. Not with the shareholders, at least. The stuff that Kendall said sounded great, but it's probably not going to stick with them. And Bill's not going to just lay down and be the scapegoat. No, I think it's time we have a blood sacrifice. In the season finale of Season 2, the entire family takes a trip on Logan's extravagant yacht. And this includes cousin Greg, who is forced to testify before the Senate. Now, initially, when the boat takes off, you've got Tom, Shiv, Jerry, Frank, Connor, Willa, Greg, Kendall, and Naomi. But soon after they take off, Roman, Carl, and Jamie are boated in after their terrifying experience in Turkey. And the family's making fun of Roman, but he doesn't really find it funny because he says it was a really scary experience. And it's changed Roman a little bit, because when he's talking about DC and Kendall, he says you did good. But Kendall keeps waiting for the joke. Yeah, you did good for a cokehead, things like that. But Roman doesn't give it to him. He says, no, man, you just did good. Tom, on the other hand, I mean, he shit the bed. And Tom is trying to play it off like he did that intentionally to take all the bad publicity away from Logan. Logan then shows up via a helicopter, and he's been spending the day trying to figure out who his fall guy should be. He got a phone call from a very important shareholder who said they think it should be him. And this is a shareholder who's on the fence, so Logan has to consider this. But either way, Logan knows that he needs a fall guy, and an important one at that. It can't just be a patsy. Upon arrival on the yacht, he gets Roman, Jamie, and Carl together to discuss the deal. And Jamie tells Logan that Roman did really good. They're going to supply $10 billion, Jamie will get the rest, and then the company can go private. And while it seems great on the surface, Roman speaks up and says, Dad, I don't think this is real. We can't really hitch our wagon to this. Jamie gets bent out of shape because he's set to make a lot of money off this deal, but Roman continues with saying that if they hitch their wagon to this and the deal falls through, they are done. They're dead in the proxy battle. And Jamie's trying to convince Logan that they don't really have another choice, and if this deal works out, they're home free. Logan then asks what Carl thinks, and Carl sides with Roman, and that just sets Jamie off. He brings up the fact that someone's going to have to pay the price if they don't go private. And it could be Roman, it could be one of his siblings, but somebody's life's going to be ruined because Roman decided that the money that they said was real wasn't real. But either way, Logan sides with both Roman and Carl because he can't hitch his wagon to something that might not be there. Jamie then gets in a boat and drives back to the mainland, and as Logan and Kendall are watching him go, Kendall brings up the fact that Stewie is close by, and Logan cuts him off saying, no, we're not going to do that. He's not quite that desperate yet. Word quickly spreads around the boat, though, that the deal fell through, and because of this, everybody knows that someone's head has to roll. And it leads to a very tense group of people. But one person it won't be is Connor, who approaches Logan looking for some money, because the play that he financed with Willa is getting torched in reviews. And the first question he asks him is if he can put some pressure on the newspapers to just write a nice review. And when Logan seems unwilling to do that, he asks if he can have $100 million. And Logan says, I'll give you $100 million if you drop out of this ridiculous presidential race. You're an embarrassment. You're a joke and you don't even realize it. So if you're willing to do that, then I'll give you $100 million. And Connor gets really pissed off at this. Now, Logan is going to have to figure whose head rolls, but he also has to get one particular person off the boat, and that person is Naomi. And it's not just because she's a Pierce, but it's also because he's worried that she will get Kendall back into drugs. And even though Kendall tells Logan that she's good for him, Logan puts out the mandate that she's got to go, and Kendall sends her on her way. The next day, Logan wakes up and his bed is empty, and he invited Marcia, but to his surprise, she hasn't shown up. He makes a phone call asking if she was aware of the invite, and she was. She just doesn't want to be with him. So his company's falling apart, and now his marriage is falling apart. He then walks out and tells the group to have a nice relaxing swim, eat some breakfast, and then everybody will talk. But nobody can relax knowing that someone's going to get fired, so they just jump right into it. Logan announces that he has decided that it will be him that takes the fall. But immediately the group says that can't happen. Kendall brings up the fact that once the news gets out that Rhea will not be the CEO because she's agreed not to say anything until after the shareholder meeting, they're going to need some leadership, and that leadership needs to be Logan Roy. So they start going around the table saying who they think it should be, and it becomes really awkward because everybody's pointing fingers. At one point, it looks like it's going to be Tom because he makes a lot of sense. He's a high-level executive who's currently in charge of cruises, and Tom feels like he's getting ganged up on because everybody's saying that it makes sense and it works, including his wife, Shiv. And while Shiv is agreeing that it works, she doesn't think it actually should be Tom. And that's what Tom is failing to hear. Either way, everybody's name eventually gets mentioned except Connor's, so he throws his name in there saying that he would do it for a large sum of money because he's cash-strapped. It ends with Logan walking away saying, we have half an idea. And that puts nobody's mind at ease and everybody heads their separate way. Logan then walks up to Kendall asking to set up a meeting with Stewie, knowing full well that it's going to be a really big embarrassment. But Kendall does so, and the two head over to meet Stewie for lunch. And the first thing they tell Stewie is, it looks like the proxy vote could go either way, but the Roy family's people are telling them that they will win. So they're going to give one offer and one offer only, and there won't be a counter offer. Logan's going to give the offer, they're going to shake hands, and then they're going to eat some food. And the offer they give Stewie, they think is a very, very fair offer. So they're extremely surprised when he says, no, that won't work. They start hurling insults, but Stewie says, look, you could have offered anything. The fact is, we're turning more and more shareholders every single day. So to the utter surprise of both Logan and Kendall, they have to boat back to their yacht with no deal. Shiv and Tom, however, have gone off to find a cove to have a picnic in. But Tom has carried over some feelings from that meeting, and it all comes out at once on the beach. It's not just the fact that she was ganging up on him, but also the fact that he can't believe she forced him to be in an open relationship the night of their wedding, because he never wanted to do that. He doesn't want to be in an open relationship. He doesn't want to do things like threesomes. And he's starting to wonder if he really wants to be in this relationship, because maybe the pain he feels without her is the less pain that he feels with her. And this catches Shiv completely off guard, and she's kind of speechless, not knowing what to say. She finally blurts out an apology and says, I'll talk to Logan, and he snaps back, no, I'll talk to Logan. And when they get back to the yacht, he does in fact, quote, talk to Logan. But his idea of talking to Logan is walking up to Logan at dinner, grabbing chicken off of his plate, eating it and just saying thank you for the chicken, Logan, and walking off. And this throws Logan for a loop. He can't figure out what the fuck Tom just did. So he walks in to find Shiv asking what the hell was that, and Shiv says, I think everybody's just on edge. They then start talking about whose head could roll, and Logan brings up the fact that Tom does make a lot of sense and asks Shiv if he would flip. Shiv then takes the heat off of Tom, saying, well, what about our original discussion? What about Kendall? He makes the most sense. And Logan does know that Kendall makes the most sense. He knows his name works, but it's just really difficult to throw one of your kids under the bus. Shiv then begs Logan just to spare Tom, and Logan tells her to go get Kendall. Kendall knows that he's making a death march, and Logan explains why this is very difficult, but it's gotta be him. He makes the most sense. He's the big name that would work with the shareholders. He was in charge of entertainment during that time period. And Kendall's thinking maybe this fits because of the fact that he killed somebody and the fact that he tried to take over the company last season. But Logan says, no, don't be ridiculous about that. He then explains what Kendall's gonna do. He's gonna fly to New York City, make a statement, and Logan is putting him in charge of this because of the fact that he can trust him. Kendall then asks him if he ever actually thought that he could run the company, and Logan starts tippy-toeing around the situation until Kendall keeps prodding and he says, no, not really. Because you don't have that killer in you, and you need to be a killer. Although, maybe nowadays you don't. I don't know. The two of them then go out and address the entire family who's eating at dinner and announce that it will be Kendall whose head is on the spoke. And the entire family is shocked by this, but Kendall is putting on a good face, saying it's all right, don't worry about it. Logan announces that the new COO will be Roman on his own, and Frank will clean up cruises. But everybody else is spared. The next day, both Greg and Kendall fly via helicopter to New York City to make a statement, and Carolina preps Kendall saying that he's going to make a statement, there are going to be 3 questions, and then that's it, they're done. So Kendall gets up in front of all of the media with cousin Greg in the very, very back, and he starts off his statement saying that it would be suggested that he would be a suitable figure to absorb all of the anger and concern over the cover-ups. But the truth is that Logan Roy is a malignant presence, a bully, and a liar, and he was fully personally aware of all the events that took place for many, many years, and he made efforts to hide this. He had a twisted sense of loyalty to bad people like Lester McClintock, and a sheer disregard for the safety of migrant workers, non-union workers, and even union workers, and also for the vulnerable performers and guests. Logan keeps a watchful eye over every inch of his empire, so the idea that he would have allowed millions of dollars in settlement money to be paid without his knowledge is just foolish. And I believe that his reign ends today. He also states that he has some documents with Logan's signature on them that proves these cover-ups and proves his knowledge of it. And those documents are with cousin Greg, and those are the documents that he pulled out of that fire pit. Kendall then drops the mic and walks away. And back on the yacht, Logan, Shiv, and Roman are watching this all go down. And Roman and Shiv are just shocked about this, not believing what their brother just did. But Logan, on the other hand, is sitting there watching it, not saying a word, but a smirk does come across his face. And that is how Season 2 of Succession ends. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please consider subscribing to the channel. I'm not going to beg you to hit a bell button, but subscription would be cool. If you liked the video, hit a thumbs up. If you thought these videos sucked, hit a thumbs down. There is a share button for a reason. Sharing is caring. And if you do say something in the comments section, I stay away from the comments section because normally they're a cesspool. But just know I do really appreciate you guys checking these videos out.